Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
Welcome to Outlaws Gunslingers
Sports
Edition. Serial Killer edition. The sport of serial killing. Yes.
Yay.
How many times is that lame joke gonna... This guy just never gets tired of it. Today we're looking at the Freeway Killer, or the Freeway Strangler, as he was called. William George Bonin. He was obviously a serial killer, a sex offender, raped, tortured, murdered young men and boys between November 68 and June of 1980 in Southern Cal. He's convicted of 14 murders, but confessed to 21 and is suspected of even more. Aren't they always? Aren't they always? He was born in Willimantic, Connecticut, January 8th, 1947, the second of three sons to Robert Leonard Bonin Sr. and Alice Dorothy Coate. Both parents were alcoholics, and his father was an ill-tempered World War II veteran who physically abused his wife and kids. His mama, she suffered from severe mood swings and frequented a bingo parlor while her sons remained unattended at home. She was regarded as having a domineering and emasculating presence in Bonin's early life.
Usually is the case. What? Usually is the case.
Oh.
January of 1950, Bonin's father, a compulsive gambler, gambled away their home in Andover, Connecticut, forcing the family to reside with Bonin's maternal grandmother.
Dude, you have to be an absolute, literally just an absolute degenerate.
Right, to gamble your house.
To gamble your house away, dude.
Holy shit. In spite of this dysfunctional environment, Bonin and his brothers were actively raised Catholic. They were baptized according to church doctrine. They attended St. Mary's Catholic School, where staff repeatedly made complaints of Bonin's aggression toward other students. He was also truant a lot and other misbehaviors. After riding his bike into a group of young girls, he was briefly placed in the juvenile hall. After returning home, he was reportedly more uncooperative toward his parents than before. In September of 1953, Bonin and his older brother, Robert Jr., placed at Franco-American School, a Catholic convent, in Lowell, Massachusetts.
Where you don't want your kids, guys.
Yeah. How can we make our child even worse?
Right.
I know.
The convent enforced harsh discipline by staff, with extreme assault being a commonplace.
Yeah.
Bonin, he recalled nuns forcing him to punch a fence when he misbehaved. Records indicate he was observed to function well in the structured environment, though. According to witnesses, Bonin was bullied and was once sexually assaulted by an older boy in 1955.
That makes sense.
According to Bonin, the older boy approached Bonin for sex, and Bonin asked the boy to tie his hands behind his back, which he said it would allow him to feel more secure and less frightened. Oh, jeez. Bonin was then bound and sexually assaulted. During his time at the convent, neither parent visited Bonin or his brother. He became worried his parents had died. He then remained at the convent until May of 1955, when he returned to live with his parents in a home owned by Bonin's grandma and our grandfather in Mansfield.
In Mansfield, Bonin attended Annie Vinton Elementary School with his younger brother, Paul. He was ridiculed as Bugsy Bonin. He became a juvenile delinquent who quarreled with students. He recalled feeling shame at his sexual attraction to younger children and male teachers. Oh, shit. Neighbors later failed to recollect his parents spending time with their children. And one worried neighbor, observing they were unkempt and hungry, provided meals and clean clothes to Bonin and Paul out of sympathy. Until Bonin's first incarceration, the children were left with their maternal grandfather by Bonin's mother, a known child molester who had sexually abused her when she was younger. Oh, my. She later speculated her daddy molested his grandsons as well. Bonin and Paul were also left with Robert Jr., who, having received the brunt of their father's abuse, often beat and belittled his siblings as well. Damn.
Largely devoid of consequences and parental supervision, Bonin stole hubcaps, license plates, and metal tags off vehicles around town and go scrap that shit.
Yeah.
1957, he was placed in a juvenile detention center for these and other petty crimes. While incarcerated, Bonin was molested by an adult counselor. Following his release, he began sexually fondling his younger brother, Paul.
Oh.
After 6 months, however, Paul informed their mother of Bonin's fondling, and Bonin was forced to sleep in a separate bedroom. That's it.
Whatever.
Bonin, he later confessed to molesting young boys and exposing himself to a 10-year-old girl around this time.
1959, Bonin attended middle school adjacent to Coventry High School. Despite showing a strong aptitude for math and science, he had otherwise mediocre grades. In late 1960, the family faced the prospect of foreclosure, and Bonin's mother kicked her father out of the home. And winning custody of the siblings. The parents reconciled, though, it usually happens, after their daddy was offered lucrative employment as a machinist in Downey, California.
So
Right. She was like, oh, okay.
got to go all the way across country, though.
I'll change, baby. New scenery. Right.
Going to make so much money will be good.
Right. In early 1962, they purchased a tract home in nearby Torrance, California.
Right. Well, Bonin then attended North High School in Torrance, where he was regarded as a social outcast.
Oh.
However, Paul later recalled him as an outwardly well-behaved teenager.
Oh, shit.
Bonin was uncomfortable around his peers and is not known to have formed any friendships throughout his adolescence. He spent his time frequenting a local bowling alley.
Oh.
By his teenage years, Bonin held an intense interest in pedophilia, but kept his emergent feelings a secret.
I would too, bud, if I was you.
Right. His pederasty became the basis of conflict with his mother, leading to frequent arguments.
Oh, wow.
He rarely attempted to interact with girls, but once reluctantly dated a girl named Linda to please his mother. So, all right, shuts her up.
Wow, dude. After dropping out of high school in 1966, Bonin molested several neighborhood children. His mother reportedly refused to acknowledge these acts or his escalated antisocial behavior, but frequently worried he would be arrested. She prayed for him and warned him often, much to his frustration.
You keep molesting these little boys, they're going to put you in jail. Whatever, Mom. Whatever. Come here, Jerry.
Right. Paul, let's go to
Wait
my
in the basement.
Eventually, she evicted him from their house for undisclosed reasons. Well,
I think it's pretty much disclosed here.
Right. We know what it has to do with.
Lacking motivation and frequently borrowing money from his parents, Bonin did what every other kid did in the 50s and 60s and joined the United States Armed Forces, in this case, the Air Force. His mother encouraged him to do that in December of 1966.
Right.
He became engaged to Linda, a decision largely determined by Bonin's mother, who felt it would quell his attraction to pubescent boys. During the engagement, he repeatedly told Linda that he had recurrent nightmares about the sexual assault and murder of a young woman.
Oh, well, while he did his military service, Bonin completed a general equivalency diploma. Served as a cook for 4 months in Alaska. He was arrested for theft on the 25th of October in 1967, but the charges were dropped due to his imminent deployment to Vietnam.
But we need another body over there, so...
Right. Don't worry, he'll get punished enough over there.
Hopefully.
Right. Stationed in Phu Loi Base Camp, he served 5 months of active duty in the 205th Assault Support Helicopter Unit as an aerial gunner, logging over 7 hours of combat and patrol time. Oh, that's cool. Bonin later claimed that his wartime experiences instilled misanthropic beliefs. Despite this, he is known to have risked his own life on one occasion while under enemy fire to save a wounded fellow airman.
Well, for this act, Bonin received a medal in recognition of his gallantry, among other medals.
Oh, good for him.
He said he engaged in allegedly consensual relations with 4 young girls and had a number of homosexual encounters in Vietnam and once in Hong Kong.
Oh, nice. That time in Hong Kong.
He also confessed to sexually assaulting 2 soldiers under his command at gunpoint around the time of the Tet Offensive. He served nearly 3 years before receiving an honorable discharge October 25th, 1968, age of 21. Dude's not even an adult, basically.
Right.
Upon returning home, he discovered that Linda, who had given birth to their son, had left him to marry another man. The old, what is it? When the army guys in World War II used to get the letters, it was like, the Dear Johns.
Right. Oh, Dear John.
Dear John letter. If you got a letter that started with Dear John, like she's from somebody else.
Yeah,
Bro.
it's over. The end of the relationship reportedly left him extremely frustrated, working as a gas station attendant. I mean, this dude was just murdering a bunch of Vietnamese. He was just murdering a bunch of Vietnamese, and now he's giving you change for the gas you just bought.
Right. He'll probably have to pump it himself this time.
Bonin returned to Downey to live with his parents, whom he resented for frequently requesting his help.
Keeps asking me to take the damn trash out.
Right. Several family members noted differences in his behavior after his military service, although Bonin refused to explain these changes.
Well, I think that part can be summed up to anybody that served in Vietnam for sure. November 17th, 1968, Bonin picked up 14-year-old Billy Jones in Arcadia, California while driving his mother's car. Bonin offered to take him home, but Jones attempted to flee the vehicle in response to Bonin's repeated questions regarding homosexuality.
Oh, so you gay? No, man. You sure you ain't gay?
You ever seen another man's penis?
No, you ever think about sucking another man's penis? Would you let another man suck your penis? Nah, man, I'm good.
Driving him to a nearby shopping center, Bonin handcuffed and raped him, knocking him unconscious in the process.
Wow.
He then dropped Jones off at a park. Returning home, Jones's mother promptly reported Bonin to the police.
Hey, finally.
Well, it's the kid's mother, not him.
Oh.
Not his mom.
Oh, yeah, Jones's mother.
Right. November 26th, still hasn't been arrested by the police for some reason. Bonin picked up 17-year-old hitchhiker John Treadwell of Torrance.
Bonin began asking him about fags and homosexuality before accelerating the vehicle and producing a handgun. Bonin parked in a secluded area. He then raped Treadwell and bludgeoned him with a tire iron.
Oh, jeez.
He threatened that he had friends who would aid in avenging him if Treadwell told the man of what had happened. On December 4th, it was reported to the Torrance Police Department by 17-year-old Alan Pruitt that a man with medium-length dark hair and olive complexion had offered him a ride before deviating from the highway and handcuffing the boy, who was extensively sexually assaulted in the vehicle. Oh wow. At least he wasn't killing him yet, I guess.
Not yet. January 1st, 1969, Bonin offered a ride to 12-year-old Lawrence Bretman in Hermosa Beach. Ignoring the boy's pleas to let him go, Bonin began threatening him. He parked, forced Bretman to perform oral sex on him, molesting and robbing him at gunpoint. What are you robbing from a 12-year-old kid? He then threatened to kill Bretman if he ever reported the incident. January 12th, he then reportedly picked up 18-year-old hitchhiker Jesus Monge, asking him about homosexuality before offering him $20 to suck his wiener. When Monge attempted to exit the vehicle, Bonin physically and sexually assaulted him.
Oh, wow. He was then handcuffed and raped. Bonin threatened Monge, stating, "I'll rip your nuts off if you don't cool it." By this point, extensive efforts were being made by local police to locate a potential serial rapist that fit Bonin's description. On the 28th, an El Segundo policewoman confronted Bonin, who had frightened 16-year-old runaway Timothy Wilson, who was present with Bonin in Bonin's mother's vehicle. Noting Bonin's frantic state and similar profile to the rapist, she searched and handcuffed him. Bonin repeatedly advised her to incarcerate him before insisting he was not responsible for his actions. Oh. He was indicted on 5 counts of kidnapping, 4 counts of sodomy, 1 count of oral copulation, and 1 count of child molestation against the 5 individuals he had abducted and assaulted since the previous November.
In March, Bonin underwent 2 psychiatric examinations, after which he was determined as being a sexual psychopath who had little control over his impulses and showed signs of depression and inappropriate emotional responses.
Okay.
Initially denying childhood abuse, Bonin confessed to being molested at the age of 8 and suspected he was molested on various occasions between 9 and 12 years old. In May, he recounted to a probation officer his recent stressful separation and admitted his guilt in molesting male youths, although he expressed desire to start a family and become a pilot upon his release.
Oh.
Sure.
Wow.
A fucking butt pilot.
Right. He said that his Vietnam service contributed to his criminal behavior, emphasizing his difficulties in seducing female partners since his return. He was evaluated to be seriously lacking insight and responsibility for crimes committed since his childhood. He pled guilty to molestation and forced oral copulation, and was sentenced to the Atascadero State Hospital in June 1969 as a mentally disordered sex offender considered amenable to treatment.
They're saying maybe he can be treated.
Right, we'll see here.
He arrived at that state hospital June 17, 1969, and was subjected to a battery of psychiatric examinations, which revealed he possessed an IQ of 121 and displayed traits of manic depression, sexual sadism disorder, and antisocial personality disorder. Physical examination revealed extensive scars on Bonin's head and butt, which he claimed to have no memory of obtaining, but were likely sustained in the Franco-American orphanage. This lack of acknowledgement led experts to conclude Bonin repressed memories of the more extreme aspects of his childhood abuse. They also noted the psychological and emotional implications of Bonin's unhealthy relationship with his ma, upon whom he remained emotionally dependent, in spite of her low opinion of him. She considered him worthless as a human being.
While Bonin regularly attended group therapy sessions while incarcerated, psychiatrists noted his defensive, aggressive attitude toward other patients and his refusal to acknowledge his homosexuality. Bonin divulged his intentions to eliminate any future victims of his sexual assaults, if deemed necessary.
Yep, see? Now nobody's going to find out about this.
Yep. He was classified as an extreme sociopath with a high probability of recidivistic behavior under periods of psychotic breakdown. Yeah, he's going to do it again. He was regarded as extremely disturbed, and his poor social skills with others were also viewed as hindering his own treatment. Yeah, you can't allow this guy to be free again.
Despite this, he willingly participated in experimental programs and was generally considered a nonviolent, helpful, and conscientious patient by staff. He had recited what he perceived psychiatrists desired to hear from him, right, believing he could manipulate them into granting him an early release. One psychiatrist wrote of Bonin that he wanted to straighten himself out, but doesn't know how to go about it. Sure.
Right. 1971, Bonin was sent to California medical facility, having been declared unsuitable for further treatment due to repeated sexual engagement with inmates.
Oh, jeez.
2 of whom were mentally challenged. This, as well as alienating and irritating fellow patients, resulted in Bonin being beaten on several occasions. Good. Bonin was subject to further psychiatric examination, which dealt with hostility toward his father and older brother. It was noted that his sexual behaviors were compulsive in response to stress. He also sought to raise money for the family of another prisoner and reportedly applied willingly for at least one treatment program. Bonin was released from prison on the 11th of June, 1974, only 3 years, after doctors concluded he was no longer a danger to the health and safety of others, you lying bastards.
These guys. Well, that July, he rented an apartment in Hollywood, L.A., with intentions of circulating within the local gay community, but was largely unsuccessful due to poor social skills, and soon relocated to his parents' new house on 10282 Angel Street in Downey. He briefly worked as a bartender in Fountain Valley, then switched to being a truck driver for a Montebello delivery firm named Dependable Drive Away in December of 1974. He was fired from the job February 75 for wrecking a trailer. In March, he attended community college classes for 2 semesters. Around this time, he would pick up hitchhikers for the purposes of having sex, eventually establishing a serious relationship with a single mom.
Oh. All right.
Back to girls, huh?
Well, while cruising for young boys on the night of the 8th of September 1975, he encountered 14-year-old David Allen McVicker. He was hitchhiking in Garden Grove. McVicker accepted Bonin's offer to drive him to his parents' home in Huntington Beach. Shortly after McVicker entered the car, Bonin asked him if he had engaged in homosexuality. I mean, geez, wait a minute, bud. McVicker replied that, I have not. He asked to leave the vehicle, which prompted Bonin to accelerate. When McVicker attempted to leave, Bonin produced a gun and drove him to a deserted field. He ordered him to undress and then beat and raped him. Bonin then strangled him with his T-shirt and a tire iron. McVicker pled for his life. Bonin immediately stopped and apologized before reverting to casual conversation. So, do you like the Lakers?
How about them Dodgers?
Jeez. He then drove McVicker to his home, stating on the way, you know what? You're an all right guy. I was going to kill you, but I want to come back for you and use you again.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, wow.
Well, soon McVicker phoned his mom,
I
who
bet.
promptly informed Garden Grove police of this incident. October 11th, 1975, Bonin was arrested for 2 assaults months later.
Should never be let go again.
Right. Upon his arrest, he informed law enforcement that next time there won't be any more witnesses.
Oh, shit.
He was charged with the rape and forcible oral copulation of a minor, and then attempted abduction of a 15-year-old boy 2 days after Bonin's assault on McVicker. The second victim rejected Bonin's offer of $35 for sex before exiting Bonin's van and telling him to leave. In response, he drove the van onto the sidewalk and attempted to strike him.
Oh, wow. This guy.
This dude needs to be
Holy goodness.
fire squad on his ass with no trial. I don't care.
Wow. Bonin pled guilty to both charges. And on the 31st of December, 1975, he was sentenced to serve between 1 and 15 years in prison at the California's Men's Facility in San Luis Obispo. 1977, Bonin subject to further psychiatric examination. It was indicated his sexual involvement with young boys related to his mother's micromanagement of his life. Get out of here. Quit blaming it on other people. In March 1978, Bonin's father suffered a major stroke, causing him to be hospitalized at Long Beach, the Veterans Administration Hospital, where his mother worked as a vocational nurse. In prison, Bonin completed mathematics courses and training as a machinist in order to secure employment. He also showed significant progress in individual therapy sessions. As a result, he was released from detention on the 11th of October with 18 months supervised probation.
November 1st, 1978, Bonin moved to an apartment in the Kingswood Village complex, located about 1 mile from his mama's and daddy's. He became acquainted with his 43-year-old neighbor, Everett Scott Frazier. Bonin became a regular attendee at Frazier's parties, where young men, drugs, and alcohol were rife.
Sounds like a good place for him.
Frazier considered him a respectful and placid individual, and frequently introduced Bonin to his young male acquaintances. The two also talked about their homosexuality.
Oh.
The following month, Bonin established a relationship with a married mother who held a criminal record for child cruelty.
Oh, that's perfect.
Mama.
Son of a bitch.
He would take trips to Anaheim with her and her kids. April
Beat
79.
the kids on the
right. April of 79. Guess what? Bonin's a free man because he's no longer on parole.
Oh, wow.
Jeez.
This is sad, sad, sad. Later, Bonin and his brother Paul relocated to Silverado and ran a bar called the Alpine Inn. It was continually under scrutiny for noise violations. An incident occurred involving Bonin reportedly locking a 16-year-old runaway in a room, threatening at knife point to bury his body in the hills. Unable to obtain a permanent liquor license due to Bonin's criminal record, the business venture was short-lived. Later, Bonin purchased a Ford van while working at his older brother's plumbing business.
Jeez, through his frequent attendance at Fraser's parties, Bonin became acquainted with 21-year-old Vernon Robert Butts and 18-year-old Gregory Matthews Miley.
Oh.
Born and raised in Norwalk, Butts was 9 years old when his father died and reportedly hailed from a broken home. Broken home. Described by acquaintances as shy and easily led by others, Butts attempted suicide on 3 occasions prior to meeting Bonin. At the time of his initial acquaintance with Bonin, Butts had developed a local reputation as an eccentric figure who had recently been fired from his employment as a magic store clerk due to his unkempt appearance and increasingly strange and unpredictable behavior. He was bisexual and frequently abused drugs and alcohol.
Butts, he was a drifter who had been in and out of penal institutions and held an extensive criminal record for offenses such as burglary and arson. He was later speculated by prosecutors to have developed a fascination with sadistic homosexual activity while incarcerated. He claimed to have been both enamored with and terrified of Bonin, whom he claimed held a kind of hypnotic control over him. In contrast, Bonin held Butts in his high regard for his social popularity, dominance, and intelligence. Although both lived externally heterosexual lifestyles, the two soon became lovers, secret lovers. Butts also held mystery parties, in which up to 16 people searched for various murder artifacts in the city of Downey, such as a hairpin or an ice pick. As a result, Bonin and Butts frequently discussed the subject of death. Uh-oh, here goes. Well, one thing leads to another.
Right. Miley, on the other hand, was an illiterate Texas native and high school dropout with an IQ of 56.
Ooh.
Raised in Lakewood, Miley's mother reportedly had a series of dysfunctional marriages and severely neglected him. Miley viewed Bonin as something of a father figure, and he often spent time with Bonin in exchange for a sexual relationship.
Nice. Bonin, he usually selected young male hitchhikers, schoolboys, or occasionally male prostitutes as his victims. The victims, aged 12 to 19, were predominantly Caucasian or Latino, slender, pale, and long-haired. He either enticed or forced them into his Ford Econoline van, where they were overpowered, had their limbs bound with a combination of handcuffs, wire, or cords. They were then sexually assaulted, extensively beaten, tortured, before typically being killed by strangulation with their own T-shirts and a tire iron.
You like that method, huh?
In order to minimize the chances of a victim escaping from the van, Bonin removed the door handles on the passenger side and the rear door.
Oh, he stowed ligatures, knives, pliers, wire, coat hangers, and other such instruments in his vehicle to restrain and torture his victims.
Wow.
The victims were usually killed inside of his van before the bodies were discarded around or near various freeways. In an apparent effort to weaken investigators, Bonin often discarded his victims' bodies in counties far from their abduction. One attorney present for Bonin's eventual court case said the escalated levels of brutality he had exhibited toward his victims had been similar to that of a drug addict, requiring an ever greater increase of dosage to maintain their euphoria.
Right, it makes sense. Wow.
Right. Always searching for that first high.
Yep. Bonin also likened his urges to addiction, emphasizing to neurologists his feelings of extreme restlessness and sexual frustration in the hours prior to his mortis, and that he had felt an intense sense of excitement as he drove in search of his victims. Oh, he's just slamming on the steering wheel. Reserving Sundays for his girlfriend, he typically cruised the freeways on Fridays and Saturdays. Bonin also later described his feeling pleasure as hearing his victims scream and sodomizing them. Dr. Albert Rosenstein, a forensic psychologist, predicted the killer was an intelligent sex offender in his late 20s or early 30s. He had spent time in psychiatric facility, and he was also abused as a child. He said that while bisexual, the killer has never been comfortable with their homosexuality and is repulsed by his actions.
Well, it's almost like he met him. In a minimum of 12 of the murders, Bonin was assisted by one or more of his 4 known accomplices.
Whoa, didn't know that.
Bonin later confessed that he felt a sense of social belonging with his accomplices that he had never experienced with anyone else.
Oh.
Dude was in an army.
Right.
Butts is suspected of accompanying or assisting Bonin on at least 9 of Bonin's murders.
Wow.
He would scrapbook newspaper clippings of his murders and boast to Butts and Frazier about them. Following media coverage of the murders, Bonin enthusiastically mentioned them to co-workers at Dependable Drive-Away. Jeez. To those unaware of his crimes, Bonin seemed obsessed with the case. He made daily trips to Orange County to buy newspapers.
Wow.
He would also tell people, this guy is giving good gays like us a bad name.
Oh. The first murder of which Bonin was charged was that of 13-year-old Thomas Glenn Lundgren. Lundgren was last seen leaving his parents' house in Reseda on the 28th of May, 1979.
Reseda, isn't that where Daniel LaRusso moved with his mama?
Very possible. Shortly before his abduction, Lundgren had reportedly told friends a man had offered to meet him at a skate park to take photos of him for a skateboarding magazine. Lundgren's partially clothed body was found the same afternoon in Agora. His clothes and severed genitals were discovered in a nearby field. Oh, wow. An autopsy revealed that Lundgren had suffered emasculation and extensive bludgeoning. In addition, he had been slashed across the throat, stabbed, strangled to death. Jeez. An expert postulated that Bonin's brutality was likely an attempt to silence his homosexual attraction to Lundgren. Bonin was assisted by Butts.
On August 4th, Bonin drove from Silverado Canyon to Westminster to spend time with Butts. He soon suggested that they rape and murder a teenage hitchhiker. Butts was amenable to the suggestion, and Bonin encountered 17-year-old Mark Shelton near Beach Boulevard. Bonin offered $400 for sexual services. According to him, he masturbated Shelton before Butts began sexually assaulting him. Bonin then drove into Cajun Pass into San Bernardino County as Shelton had oral sex with him.
Wow.
So apparently this guy accepted, huh?
Right.
Bonin soon parked the vehicle and raped him. Enraged with his fear and resistance, Bonin sexually assaulted him. And Bonin and Butts physically assaulted him until he lost consciousness.
Oh, my.
He was violated with foreign objects, including a stick, causing him to enter a state of shock which proved fatal. He was then discarded beside a gravel road in Cajun Pass.
The night
It's
of
worse than
right.
Dean Coral and his little two black
those
dogs.
fucking people. Yeah, I forgot about those assholes. The night of the following day, Bonin and Butts encountered 17-year-old West German student Marcus Grabs attempting to hitchhike from the Pacific Coast Highway. According to Bonin, he engaged in consensual relations with the youth, who agreed to be bound with lengths of cord and ignition wire. Bonin then retrieved a knife, intimidated Grabs as Butts drove toward Bonin's home. There, Grabs was again raped and beaten, and Grabs reportedly broke loose and punched Bonin. This caused Bonin to strangle him and stab him 77 times.
Oh, there's that rage, huh?
His body discarded in Malibu Creek the following day.
Jeez. Oh, here we go. August 9th, Bonin was again detained for molesting a 17-year-old boy from Dana Point. This violation of the conditions of his parole should have resulted in Bonin being returned to prison at Orange County Jail.
Yeah.
However, an administrative error committed prior to Bonin's scheduled court date resulted in his release.
Oh, you fucking idiots.
August 13th, Frazier then drove to collect Bonin from jail. He later recollected that as he drove Bonin home, he said, "No one's going to testify again. This is never going to happen to me again." At the time, Frazier had interpreted this as a statement of remorse,
Right.
saying, "I'll never do it again." Nope.
Wasn't it? Resuming his murder spree, Bonin did not show at his court appointment. Obviously, he was never coming back. Bonin had also returned to his parents' house. He gradually developed a reputation as a child molester among local residents due to his habit of inviting young boys into his house under the guise of providing alcohol and viewing pornography with them. Some neighbors recalled observing young boys accompany Bonin inside, and they would later hear screaming and crying. Bonin's family, who were occasionally present, claimed to have never witnessed Bonin abuse any of them.
August 20th, he picked up 18-year-old Robert Werestek in Newport Beach. He then allegedly coaxed him to perform oral sex by offering him $50. At knife point, Bonin bound and raped him and then drove to Butts' residence. On the drive, Butts performed oral sex on Werestek before striking him and taking Bonin's place as a driver.
Oh, nice. Jeez.
Bonin then tortured him by bending his fingers and sexually assaulting and bludgeoning him
Jeez.
before strangling him. His body was found September 27th along Interstate 10.
Man.
Jeez, dude.
On the 27th of August, Bonin and Butts abducted 15-year-old Hollywood boy Donald Ray Hayden on Santa Monica Boulevard. Butts was driving the van. Bonin offered $50 for sex. When Butts made an accidental wrong turn, Hayden became frantic, causing Bonin to beat, bind, torture, and sodomize him. Jeez. Bonin then strangled him to death. Butts performed oral sex on his corpse before the pair dumped his body at a construction site near the Ventura Freeway. His body was discovered hours later. His rectal damage led to a coroner's theory that he had been impaled by a large object.
Jeez, dude. What are they doing? September 9th, Bonin and Butts encountered a 17-year-old boy from La Mirada, which was David Louis Murillo, and he was cycling. After Murillo entered the van, Bonin offered him money for sex, which he refused. He then attempted to fondle Murillo before binding him and driving to Butts' residence.
Oh, man.
As Butts drove, Bonin sexually assaulted and raped him. He then traded places with Butts, who performed oral sex on and beat Murillo. At least oral sex does it.
Right.
They then parked the vehicle, bound him, raped him more. He was extensively bludgeoned, then strangled. His body was discovered along Highway 101 on the 12th of September.
Bonin is not known to have killed again until on or about the 1st of November. He and Butts abducted and murdered an unidentified man with brown hair, whom Bonin claimed to be 5'6" and 18 years old. At some point, Bonin allegedly said the man was to die because your folks paid us to find you and killed you. Oh, wow. The two beat him. Bonin strangled him to death before inserting an ice pick into his head. Oh! His body was discarded alongside State Route 99, south of Bakersfield. There's that Bakersfield again. On the 30th of November, an unassisted Bonin abducted a 17-year-old Frank Dennis Fox from Bellflower.
As usual, Bonin sodomized him, strangled him until he died. Jeez. His body was found 2 days later alongside the Ortega Highway, which is 5 miles east of San Juan Capistrano. The body bore signs of binding and blunt force trauma. Then 10 days later, a 15-year-old boy from Long Beach, John Frederick Kilpatrick, he left his home and was offered money for sex by Bonin.
Oh, wow.
After engaging in mutual oral sex, Kilpatrick was bound and raped by Bonin before being transported to his parents' house, where he was flagellated with string and then strangled to death with it. His body was discarded near Rialto.
Oh, wow. Oh, that body was found on the 13th of December, but Kilpatrick remained known as a John Doe until the 5th of August, 1980. Because of his troubled background, which caused him to disappear for days at a time, his mother hesitated to even report him missing. His friends also mistakenly reported seeing him at the mall. As a result, he was not reported missing until February.
Jeez.
Wow.
Jeez, even after the body was found, they just now reported missing. January 1st, 1980, Bonin encountered 16-year-old Ontario boy Michael Francis McDonald near the Chino Airport. Under the guise of providing drugs for him to sell, Bonin parked behind an apartment building. In the van, he bound, beat, and raped him. His body was found alongside Highway 71 in the outskirts of Chino and was not identified until March 24th. Morning of February 3rd, Bonin invited a 16-year-old boy into his parents' house to drink and have sex. Bonin allegedly caught him stealing $100 from his billfold and fiercely resolved to commit a murder.
Right. Damn. Jeez. Later that evening, he drove to Hollywood with Gregory Miley with the specific intention of committing a murder with him. They encountered 15-year-old Charles Miranda nearby the Starwood nightclub along Santa Monica Boulevard. According to Miley, Bonin and Miranda had consensual sex in the van as he drove. Bonin then told Miley that Miranda was going to die. Miley asked why Bonin would not let him go. Bonin replied, because he'll know us and know the van. Bonin beat, bound, and gagged Miranda. Informed him that he had to be killed due to his earlier robbery. Miranda began begging for his life, and Bonin began sexually assaulting Miranda, and Miley unsuccessfully attempted to rape him. In frustration, the two started physically assaulting him, and Bonin strangled him to death. His body later dumped in the L.A. alleyway.
Wow.
Jeez.
Well, 5 minutes after discarding the body, Bonin suggested to Miley to do another one. Jeez.
Wow.
Miley initially protested and stated he wanted to go home, but eventually complied. A few hours later in Huntington Beach, the pair encountered 12-year-old James McCabe.
You bastards.
McCabe. He had been dropped off at the corner of a bus stop by his older brother, who had given him money to take the bus to Disneyland. 12 years old? What are these dudes doing? Where are these parents?
You ain't kidding.
He was lured into Bonin's van on the promise he would be driven to his intended destination, and he would also give him a little bit of weed to smoke.
Oh, damn.
Jeez.
According to Miley, McCabe got into the van. Bonin drove to a grocery store. Bonin parked the van, began hugging and kissing McCabe before binding him and telling him he was being kidnapped for ransom. Bonin began punching him, and as Miley drove around, Bonin raped him and bludgeoned him with a tire iron. Bonin then forced him to sleep in his arms.
Oh, jeez.
Upon McCabe's waking, Miley and Bonin beat him into unconsciousness again, and Bonin crushed his neck with the tire iron. Jeez. He then strangled McCabe to death, and he and Miley discarded the corpse at a construction site in Walnut. McCabe's body was discovered 3 days later. The very next day, Bonin was arrested for violating the conditions of his parole. He was remanded in custody at the Orange County Jail until March 4th. Why ever? Don't let this guy go. Holy fuck.
Following his release, he was hired as a truck driver at Dependable Drive-Away.
Oh, again?
He angered his boss, who was unaware of his status as a sex offender, by picking up hitchhikers in his presence on one occasion, and by taking long, unnecessary routes, which detectives later took interest in.
Oh.
March 14th, Bonin abducted 18-year-old Van Nuys man Ronald Gatlin, beat him, sodomized him, hacked at him with an ice pick. Following day, his body was found behind an industrial building.
Jeez. It's insane that he's been arrested multiple times for this shit, and that's what I'm talking about. And still allowed to run free. I just don't understand it. 21st of March, Bonin offered a ride, 14-year-old hitchhiker, Glenn. And why is a 14-year-old hitchhiking? Holy fuck.
Because it's the 70s.
And 80s, right? Glenn Norman Barker, 14-year-old hitchhiking. Barker beaten, raped with objects, strangled, burned with a cigarette, and his rectum was distended.
Swollen due to pressure from the ends that bloated. So it just from getting abused.
Oh, my.
Oh, jeez.
Later that day, 15-year-old Russell Dwayne Rowe was abducted in Garden Grove. He was bound, beaten, strangled after an estimated 8 hours of captivity. The two boys' bodies discarded in Cleveland National Forest, close to the Ortega Highway, found on the 23rd of March. Jeez, oh, Pete.
Well, one Friday evening in March, he again offered, this time a 17-year-old William Ray Pugh, a ride home as the pair left Fraser's residence. He accepted. During the ride, Bonin asked him to have sex. Oh, according to Pugh, we got a getaway.
Uh-oh.
He attempted to leave the van once Bonin had slowed down at a stoplight. Bonin grabbed him, dragged him back inside, and admitted that he enjoyed abducting, restraining, torturing, and strangling hitchhikers.
He's like, yeah, that was just a fake question.
Right. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Bonin then informed Pugh how to murder without getting caught. Oh. Bonin then said he had chosen to refrain from sexually assaulting and murdering Pugh, not out of sentiment, but because the pair had been seen leaving Fraser's party together.
Oh.
Pugh was then driven to what he claimed was his home, and when the van left, he ran to his house.
Well, Pugh, he must have been intrigued by this whole situation because he kept on associating with Bonin. 25th of March, Bonin, Pugh, abducted 15-year-old runaway Harry Todd Turner from a Los Angeles street. Turner escaped a boys' home in Lancaster 4 days prior. Pugh later testified that he and Bonin lured Turner into Bonin's van with an offer of $20 for sex.
I realize it's like L.A. and whatever, but how likely is it that all these little 14, and 15, 16-year-old boys are actually accepting $20 for sex?
Right.
Where do they just happen to find a happenstance that every one of these hitchhikers are up for gay sex?
Right. Jeez. After binding and sodomizing Turner, Bonin bit into his penis until it tore. And then ordered Pugh to beat him up. After Pugh bludgeoned and beat him, Bonin strangled him to death. His body discarded behind an L.A. business.
Well, April 10th, Bonin discharged from parole once again. And then he encountered 16-year-old Bellflower
The fact
youth.
that he's doing this shit on parole.
Right. Nobody's watching him either.
Right.
He then encountered 16-year-old Bellflower youth Stephen John Wood walking to school. Wood's older brother had introduced him to Bonin, so he willingly entered Bonin's van. His hog-tied body was discarded in a Long Beach alleyway close to the Pacific Coast Highway. Bonin then allegedly waited until dusk to discard it. Woods' autopsy revealed he had been killed by strangulation. Jeez. April 29th, he encountered a 19-year-old Darren Kendrick at his workplace in Stanton.
Oh, jeez. Well, as usual, he lured Kendrick into the van on the pretext of selling him drugs. Oh, this time drugs.
That's believable.
Bonin then drove to Butts' apartment in Lakewood. There, he asked Kendrick whether he was gay. And then Kendrick was like, oh, hell no, and attempted to flee. Bonin and Butts, they bound him. And then Butts sodomized him.
Butt to butt fucking
Butts to butt. Yeah, that's terrible. Bonin raised the volume of Butts' sound system to cover Kendrick's screams. Butts then held Kendrick's mouth open while Bonin poured chlorohydrate down his throat, causing him to sustain caustic chemical burn. Oh, dude.
They're just doing anything now.
Oh, my.
It's like the dudes that,
yes.
in that hi-fi murder thing that we did, they were
terrible.
making them drink drain cleaner or some
Shit.
Well, the kid started fading out, just kind of whimpering. I don't like raping some limp piece of meat. It's no fun if they don't let me know how it feels. Guess we gave him too much of the stuff. Next time, I figured I wouldn't use as much. Anyways, I'd gotten my rocks off, and the kid was getting born. No fun anymore. So I strangled him. That is Bonin describing the murder of Darren Lee Kendrick.
Shit, what a piece of shit.
Kendrick fought his attackers, apparently, but stopped before complaining of dizziness. Bonin then strangled him, and Butts drove an ice pick into his ear, fatally wounding his cervical spinal cord. His body was then discarded behind a warehouse close to the Artesia Freeway.
12th of May, Bonin abducted and murdered an acquaintance of his. He later stated that he decided to kill them when he awoke that morning because he was tired of having him around. The body of 17-year-old Lawrence Sharp, discarded behind a Westminster gas station. His body was found on the 18th of May. Autopsy revealed that he had been bound, sodomized, beaten, and strangled. The usual.
It continues. May 19th, Bonin asked Butts to accompany him on a killing. However, Butts reportedly refused. Then this time, unassisted, Bonin abducted 14-year-old Southgate boy Sean King in Downey. King was strangled to death before his body was discarded in Ucapa. Bonin then visited Butts' apartment and bragged to him about the murder. By early 80, Bonin's murders were receiving considerable media attention, and leading gay rights activists, they had offered a reward totaling $50,000 for information leading to conviction of the suspect or suspects. Yeah, how is this not like...
Right.
Dude, imagine right now, 1980, there's like 5 of the most prolific serial killers
Just
on the run right now.
doing kind of
in the same damn area almost,
Yeah.
except for Ted Bundy. He was everywhere.
All right. Fucking California, dude. Ridiculous.
California, Washington, and Oregon, dude. All
Yep.
of them.
Having by this stage determined a definitive link between many of the recent murders, investigators from the jurisdictions where victims had been abducted or discovered had begun sharing info in their hunt for the suspect or suspects. 6 officers from 3 of the jurisdictions formed a task force dedicated to their apprehension. By May, Pugh had been arrested for auto theft. On the 28th of May, he overheard the details of ongoing murders on a local radio broadcast. And he confided to a counselor that he knew the perpetrators' modus operandi, which was described to him by Bonin 2 months prior. It's like, I can tell you exactly how they're doing it.
This counselor reported Pugh's suspicions to the police, who in turn relayed a confidential tip to L.A. Police Department Homicide Sergeant John St. John. Your parents hated you, bud.
Right.
St. John conducted an extensive interview with Pugh the next day. Although Pugh withheld the fact that he had accompanied Bonin with one of the murders,
Right.
the information he provided led St. John to deduce that Bonin might be the Freeway Killer.
I mean, all evidence points towards it.
Well, meanwhile, while this is going on, Bonin invites an 18-year-old homeless drifter named James Michael Monroe, whom he had encountered while cruising for young male prostitutes. He said, come move into my family home in exchange for sex. All right. I guess homeless. Yeah, that makes sense. You can live with me, and we'll just do it all the time, I guess.
Right.
Monroe, who was a runaway from St. Clair, Michigan, long way from home, buddy,
You ain't kidding.
who had been evicted from his family's home in early 80. Monroe had gone to California to meet a friend, but became homeless after he was robbed of money that he earned as a little male prostitute in Hollywood.
Well, at Bonin's home, Monroe began a consensual sexual relationship with him. He accepted an offer of employment at Dependable Driveway. Oh, look at that. Monroe later described his initial impression of Bonin as being a good guy. Really normal guy.
So what made him take in this homeless guy and
Maybe
let them live together?
Maybe he wanted like another acquaintance and something new.
Yeah.
On the 1st of June, Bonin informed Monroe that he wanted them both to abduct, sexual assault, and murder a hitchhiker. A police investigation into Bonin's background revealed his extensive history of convictions for sexually assaulting. You shouldn't have to do that much investigation, bud. As soon as you pulled up his name, it should have been beware.
Right.
St. John assigned a surveillance team to monitor his movements from there on out. Okay, you're going down the right path here now, finally.
They did indeed begin surveilling Bonin on the evening of June 2nd, 1 hour prior to Monroe and Bonin discarding the body. 1 hour prior. Discarding the body of Bonin's final victim. Hours earlier, Bonin and Monroe encountered 18-year-old Stephen J. Wells on El Segundo Boulevard. They enticed him into the van. According to the pair, upon learning Wells was bisexual, Bonin had consensual sex with Wells before persuading him to go to his parents' house. There, they continued having sex.
Oh.
Jeez, dude, you have enough sex?
Holy shit. After Bonin paid Wells $200 to allow himself to be bound with a clothesline, Wells became suspicious of their intentions, and he became very frantic. He's like, oh, wait a minute here. Bonin retreated to the kitchen, telling Monroe they were both going to kill Wells. They then gagged and beat him in the hallway.
I like how it takes no convincing to these other dudes just to go along with it.
Right.
Maybe they're scared of him.
It's possible.
The one kid did say that Bonin had like this energy of him.
Right. Wells pled for his life, but Bonin strangled him to death anyway. Bonin ordered Monroe to retrieve a cardboard box, which the two placed Wells' body inside of and carried to Bonin's van. And where are these,
This is... Not yet. They haven't discarded the body yet.
All right.
Later, while driving to Butts' apartment, Bonin informed Monroe that he, Butts, and others had committed many of the Freeway Killer murders.
Not many, all.
Right. At the apartment, Bonin invited Butts to view Wells' body in the van. He then asked where he should dispose of the corpse. Monroe later testified Butts dissuaded Bonin from discarding it in the nearby canyons and recommended discarding him near a gas station.
Right.
There you go, listen to Butts.
They drove to a disused gas station in Huntington Beach and discarded him there. The body, discovered 5 hours later by two brothers who had parked nearby, probably doing drugs or something.
I thought they said the cops were surveilling him an hour prior to the discard of the body. Why didn't they find him then or see him doing it?
Bonin and Monroe returned to Bonin's house after that. Later that very night, Bonin hinted to Monroe, who was fearful for his life at this point. He was like, you know what? We should stay quiet regarding Wells' murder, obviously. Or else you're gonna face potential death, bud.
After 9 days of uneventful surveillance.
What do you mean?
Okay. June 11th, plainclothes police observed Bonin driving through Hollywood, unsuccessfully attempting to lure 5 separate boys into his van before succeeding in luring one.
Okay, this guy do something about it?
The police then followed Bonin until he parked at a service station close to the Hollywood freeway, then discreetly approached the vehicle. Upon hearing screams and banging sounds coming from inside the van, the officers forced their way inside. They discovered Bonin raping 17-year-old Orange County runaway Harold Eugene Tate, whom he had handcuffed and bound.
There you go. Perfecto.
In the middle of a crime.
Finally got his ass. Jeez. Bonin was initially charged with the rape of a minor and held on suspicion of Miranda's murder.
Even if he didn't get nothing with the murders, this is now his third charge of raping a minor. Dude needs
handcuffed and he has to be kidnapping and unlawful detainment or some shit. He was detained for $250,000, as was his bond. Later, Bonin's girlfriend notified his boss of his arrest, adding that the arrest was in connection to the Freeway Killer case. Damn, he still has a girlfriend at this point?
It's the one that he reserved Sundays for, remember?
Oh, yeah. This caused Monroe, who was already apprehensive at Bonin's absence from work that day, he got very frantic and scared. He's like, oh, shit. The very next day, Monroe stole Bonin's car, fled back to Michigan, where he temporarily resided before being arrested.
It's over with.
Why would you do that?
Made it all the way to Michigan. No good for you.
Right. Go back home.
No money.
Be humiliated in front of your family.
Right. Like, we haven't seen you in 6 years since we kicked you out, and now you come and get arrested for murder.
So what'd you do? Well, you know, met a few people.
Had some experiences.
Right.
Well, inside Bonin's van, investigators discovered numerous artifacts which proved his culpability in the Freeway Killer murders. These included various restraining devices, knives, and a tire iron.
That had probably all kinds of blood on it.
Right. Yeah. They also noted the removed door handles.
I mean, come on.
A forensic examination of the van and Bonin's home revealed extensive traces of bloodstains. Inside the glove box, investigators discovered a scrapbook of newspaper clippings related to the murder. Bonin's 61-year-old father died of cirrhosis of the liver October 11th, 1980, 4 months after Bonin's arrest. His condition sourced, obviously, alcohol addiction. If you got cirrhosis of the liver. Yeah, that'll happen.
Here's an excerpt from one of Bonin's taped confessions in 1980 concerning Marcus Grabs and other victims. I tied him up with nylon, this electrician type of wire. I pulled a knife on him. He got scared. I stabbed him in the left arm. It surprised me that I did it. I stabbed him again, and then again, and again, and again, until he was helpless. They would try to stop me from stabbing them, and I would stab just to stab. I stuck them with the knife in different places because I didn't know where to stab, you know. I didn't know where the vital organs were or anything like that.
Wow.
Wow, what a piece of this guy is.
Although initially alleging his innocence in the murders, Bonin confessed his guilt to St. John after reading a letter from Sean King's mother, imploring him to reveal the location of her son's body.
Right, he felt a little conscience in there, a little guilt.
Bonin, he made sure to clarify, however, that it was not to ease the mother's pain, but on the knowledge that, because King was buried in San Bernardino County, police would likely buy him a hamburger for lunch on the extensive trip. Oh, jeez.
It's true. It's fucking true.
Man, this guy.
Wow. Over the course of several evenings, Bonin confessed to abducting, raping, and killing 21 young men and boys in graphic detail. He expected no remorse for his actions, but he showed extreme embarrassment and regret over being caught.
They always are.
An Orange County investigator recalled that there was not a policeman in that room that did not want to kill Bonin for his confession.
I bet.
Bonin stated that his primary accomplice in the murders had been Butts, while Miley and Monroe were accomplices in other murders. What a piece of shit. You don't have to give up those guys. Right. I mean, I guess you do, but...
Not really. Bonin was physically linked to many of the murders by blood and semen stains. Numerous carpet fibers found upon 7 of the victims' bodies were a precise match with the carpet in Bonin's van. Furthermore, it's 1980. The DNA's advanced like that? What happened to all the other cases we had in the 80s that they couldn't do nothing?
Fuck out of here.
Furthermore, on 3 bodies, investigators found hair samples which were a precise match with Bonin. Medical evidence revealed that 6 of the murders for which he was charged, they were committed by a unique windlass strangulation method, which was later referred to by Bonin's prosecutor as a signature or a trademark of his.
Oh.
So it's like a
cranker,
winch it up, and oh, jeez, it tightens around their neck.
Yeah, like the old Chinese did.
Sort of probably like using a stick or something and turning it like that. Yeah, that's crazy. Or the tire iron, probably.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Initially, he was formally arraigned for the murder of Grabs on the 25th of July. By July 29th, Bonin had been charged with an additional 15 murders, to which he had confessed to, and upon which the prosecution believed they had sufficient evidence to obtain a conviction. In addition to the 16 murder indictments, he was also charged with 11 counts of robbery, 1 count of sodomy, get the hell out of here, and 1 count of mayhem.
Oh, no. Mayhem like me.
Yeah, he was held without bond.
Damn.
I would hope so.
He was not brought to trial for the murders of Mark Shelton, Robert Riersteck, John Kilpatrick, Michael McDonald, or the November 79 John Doe, because police did not find sufficient evidence linking him alone to the crimes. This is despite Bonin confessing to the murders of Kilpatrick and McDonald.
Bullshit.
Just because you confess, you still got to prove it.
Yeah, no, this is for the family.
August 8th, all charges were formally submitted against them. And 3 days later, attorney Earl Hansen was appointed as his legal representative.
Bullshit. How could Earl Hansen, you piece of shit?
He was appointed.
I don't care.
He didn't have any money. He remained Bonin's attorney until October 81, when at Bonin's request, he was then replaced by William Charvet and Tracy Stewart.
Son of a bitch. Based on Bonin's confession, the Popo obtained a warrant authorizing a search of Butts' Lakewood apartment on the same site. What, you idiot? None of those words are there.
But Butts didn't flee? Hell, dude.
Yeah, based on Bonin's confession, there was a warrant obtained for Butts' property on the same date as Bonin's initial arraignment. This July 25th search uncovered evidence linking Butts to 7 murders, which Bonin... Dude, you know he's arrested and all that, but he still kept all this shit.
Right. There's no way it didn't make the news.
Butts was brought before a municipal court on the 29th of July and charged with accompanying Bonin on 6 moitas and with 3 counts of robbery. The L.A. County Sheriff's Department told the press, Bonin and Butts are believed to be responsible for the kidnapping, torture, and murder of at least 21 young males between May of 1979 and June of 1980, 14 of which have been committed in their jurisdiction. Was there any prior arrests for any of these guys? Oh, yeah, Bonin's been known to do this for years. Just let him go.
21 dudes in 52 weeks.
Insane, dude. It's one every week and a half. Every 2 weeks.
Crazy. Despite initially proclaiming his innocence, like we said, Butts this time, he soon confessed to having accompanied Bonin on each of the murders he was charged with and to have sexually abused several victims. Butts claimed to have participated in the murders primarily out of fear. He claimed it was either go or become the next victim.
It's true.
And he only found the courage to confess upon learning Bonin was in custody.
All right.
Butts was adamant he had only a limited role in the victim's torture, but confessed to actively torturing one of them.
Right. He claimed, upon their successfully luring a victim into the van, he would typically drive a short distance before stopping the vehicle in order to assist Bonin in restraining and torturing their captive. He claimed his participation in the murders were typically limited to restraining the victims. But he also admitted to mutilating one victim with a wire coat hanger. He said that some victims had been subjected to more extensive blunt force trauma than others because Bonin would escalate the beatings if the victim resisted his sexual advances. Damn.
Butts rejected an offer to plead guilty to all charges filed against him in exchange for a life sentence with a minimum of 25 before parole possibility. He did not agree to accept any form of plea bargain or to testify against Bonin.
Oh, you idiot. You're getting the maximum now.
He was brought before Orange County Municipal Court Judge Richard Orozco on November 14, 1980, where he was formally charged with participating in 3 further murders committed in the county. His trial was scheduled for July 27, 1981. Damn, that's quick.
Damn. Well, just 4 days later, on the 31st of July, on July 31st, 1980, Monroe was arrested in his hometown, Port Huron, Michigan. He was extradited to California, charged with Wells' murder. He pled innocent to all charges against him on the 14th of August. Miley, he was in Texas. He discussed his role in Miranda and the McCabe murders in a recorded phone conversation with a friend, thus substantiating Bonin's earlier confession. 22nd of August, Miley arrested, charged by California authorities with the murders of Miranda and McCabe. 18th of December, he pled not guilty to 2 charges of first-degree murder, but at 2 pretrial hearings in May of 1981, he pled guilty.
Changed his mind.
No. Yeah.
First-degree murder charges were then brought against the 20-year-old acquaintance of Bonin, Eric Martin Wijnands.
Where did this guy come from?
In December of 1980. After police learned Pugh had willingly accompanied Bonin in Harry Todd Turner's murder, Wijnands charges were dropped in January of 1981. Okay. With the county prosecutor citing insufficient evidence as the cause.
Right.
All right, Eric, you're lucky, buddy.
All right. At a preliminary hearing held in L.A. County before L.A. County Superior Court Judge Julius Leatham on the 2nd of January, 1981, Bonin formally pled innocent to 14 first-degree murder charges and numerous counts of sodomy, robbery, and mayhem. In 11 of these indictments, a felony murder robbery special circumstance was also alleged. Bonin was ordered to return to court on the 7th of January for pre-trial motions and the formal setting of a trial date. Get on with it. Holy shit.
On 7th, Butts, he was arraigned on 5 counts of murder, 3 counts of robbery. By this point, he had been listed as an accomplice in the murders of Lundgren, Shelton, Grabs, Hayden, Murillo, Werelsteck, Kendrick, Wells, and the November 1979 John Doe. 4 days after his formal plea, he committed suicide by hanging himself with a towel in his cell.
What a pussy.
He gone. He had attempted suicide at least 4 times prior to his arrest. His attorney, Joe Ingber, theorized that his depressive state had been magnified by the impending release of transcripts of his client's testimony at the preliminary hearing, in which Butts had graphically described his victim's torture. He was worried about the effect it would have on his friends and family. They're still going to hear it.
All right, dumbass. Suicide renders Butts' recorded statement in 3 cases inadmissible as evidence.
Oh, because he killed himself.
The charges against Bonin in relation to Shelton, Werelsteck, and the John Doe were therefore dropped.
Damn.
Both Miley and Monroe agreed to testify against Bonin in court in exchange for being spared the death penalty and a dismissal of additional charges of sodomy and robbery filed against Monroe. In the case of Miley, Norris agreed to accept 2 separate pleas of guilty to first-degree murder. This was in exchange for 2 concurrent sentences of life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years if Miley agreed to testify against Bonin at both trials. William Pugh also testified, having pled guilty to 1 count of voluntary manslaughter, for which he later received 6 years in prison for. Not enough.
Look at you, Pugh. October 19th, Bonin was brought to trial in Los Angeles County, charged with the murder of 12 of his victims, whose body had been found within this constituency. He was tried before Superior Court Judge William Keene. Trial commenced November 5th. Norris, acting as prosecutor, he sought the death penalty for each count of murder for which Bonin was tried. Norris described Bonin's routine with technique with regards to his victims' torture and how he would reach the climax of the orgy by killing them.
He asserted that Bonin murdered as a group sport with accomplices they had groomed because of their low mentality. Miley and Monroe testified against Bonin, describing their murders in graphic detail. Miley testified to his participation in the murders of Miranda McCabe, describing how the 2 victims were beaten and tortured before being murdered. He then said that Bonin had pressed a tire iron against Miranda's neck, and Miley jumped down on him, killing him. Ooh.
Oh. Jeez. The strategy of Charvet and Stewart was to challenge the credibility of the prosecution's witnesses and to suggest that significant mitigating factors as to the causes of Bonin's behavior lay in the extensive physical, sexual, and emotional abuse he had endured throughout his early life. Whatever. They summoned Dr. David Foster, an expert on the developmental effects of abuse on children. They wanted him to testify to the conclusions of his psychological examinations of Bonin.
Well, he found that as a result of repeated abandonment as a child, Bonin had not received the nurturing, protection, and behavioral feedback necessary for sufficient psychological development. He said the abuse of Bonin had been so consistent and prevalent that he was confused as to the difference between violence and love. In a direct rebuttal, the prosecution summoned forensic psychiatrist Park Dietz, a noted expert in impulse control disorder and sexual sadism disorder, who testified that Bonin's behavior was inconsistent with an inability to control his impulses, and that his actions were reflected upon planning as opposed to impulsive behavior.
Right.
Yes. Idiots.
He also concluded Bonin was a sexual sadist and that although he suffered from antisocial personality disorder, neither of these conditions had impaired his ability to control his actions. November 24th, prison inmate Lloyd Douglas, he testified that Bonin had bragged to him of his culpability in the Freeway Killer murders while they were both in L.A. County Jail in 1980. Douglas then alleged salacious details regarding Bonin's torture of his victims that were otherwise not supported with valid evidence, though.
In the cross-examination, Douglas conceded he had only related these claims to authorities after pleading guilty to charges of voluntary manslaughter and second-degree burglary against him. He also testified to being Lawrence Sharp's cousin. Oh, shit. Against overruled objections from the defense, Fresno-based reporter David Lopez waived his previously sought immunity under Californian shield law and agreed to testify on behalf of the prosecution. As to the details of 7 interviews Bonin had granted him between December 1980 and April of 1981. Oh, he can do that?
Shield law apparently probably covers journalists from
Exposing the truth?
reporters' privilege or to prevent prosecution when states' laws differ. Lopez testified Bonin had said he would refuse to talk with any other reporter if Lopez would agree not to broadcast the precise details of the interview.
Oh.
When Lopez had agreed to these conditions, Bonin confessed to him he was indeed the Freeway Killer and that he had killed 21 victims. Allegedly, Bonin had confided that although he resented the prospect of being executed, he had opted to commit murder simply because he had enjoyed the sounds of kids dying.
Oh.
When Lopez asked Bonin what he would be doing if he were still at large, Bonin had replied he would still be killing because it got easier with each one we did. Yeah, after a while, you probably don't feel anything.
Right. Upon cross-examination, Bonin's defense attorney ensured that Lopez conceded that his testimony was based upon what he had recalled from the interviews, as opposed to any handwritten notes. He also denied he had received any form of payment to testify.
Closing arguments were in late December. Norris described Bonin as someone who derived extreme pleasure from his victim's suffering and that he acted with malice aforethought. Norris outlined the torture Bonin's victims had endured before concluding his closing arguments by urging the jury to give him what he has earned.
Uh-oh.
Charvet did not specifically ask the jurors to find Bonin not guilty. Instead, he requested that they only return the reasonable verdict you can bring.
Right. Wow. This
Guilty.
indicated a likelihood of not guilty verdicts on at least some counts Bonin was charged with. Chavette doubted the credibility of some of Miley and Monroe's testimony. He emphasized their attorney state's evidence made them tailor the testimony to the desires of the police.
Perhaps.
He reminded the jury that he had exposed inconsistencies in Monroe's account of Wells's murder, that Monroe lied on numerous occasions, that Bonin had been extensively abused as a child, and all the diagnosis the doctors in Atascadero had reached. He said the prosecution's case was full of holes and alleged that they had resorted to revulsion tactics in the hope that Bonin would be convicted upon that basis. I mean, the guy admitted to all this shit. Jeez.
December 28th, the jury formally began their deliberations. January 6th, 1982, they convicted Bonin of 10 of the murders for which he was tried. He was found not guilty of the murders of Lundgren and King. He was found not guilty of committed sodomy upon Grabs, not guilty of committing mayhem upon Lundgren, and not guilty of robbing one other victim.
Even though he was.
Later, the prosecution and defense made alternate pleas for the actual sentence the jury should decide, with Norris requesting the death penalty, and obviously Charvet requesting life in prison. The jury further found that the special circumstances required within California state law, which is multiple murders and robbery apparently in this one, had been met in the cases for which Bonin was found guilty, and thus unanimously recommended he receive the death penalty. Go to sleep, bitch.
Right.
Die, motherfucker, die.
Bonin was cleared of King's sodomy and murder because he had led police to King's body in 1980
Oh, that's trash.
under the agreement that his doing so could not be used against him in court. Therefore,
At least admitted that he did it, at least. So get the family some type of closure.
right. Therefore, the prosecutors had discussed King's disappearance at the trial, but not the discovery of his body. He was cleared of the charges of mayhem and murder against Lundgren because, according to Lopez, he had strenuously denied committing this particular killing in their interviews. Well, maybe he didn't.
He had a total disregard for the sanctity of human life and the civilized society. Sadistic, unbelievably cruel, senseless, and deliberately premeditated. Guilty beyond any possible or imaginary doubt. That is what Los Angeles Superior Court Judge William Keene said as he pronounced the death sentence upon Bonin March 12, 1982.
Here we go. Kill this guy. In February, Charvet argued against imposition of the death verdict returned by the jury. Despite his impassioned appeal, Keene formally sentenced Bonin to death for the 10 murders in order that if his death sentence were commuted to one of the life in prisons, the sentence should run consecutively. Yes.
Meaning, you got 10 lives in a row.
Right.
Even if you do live forever, you're in there forever.
Right. Bonin was then ordered to wait his execution via the gas chamber at San Quentin State Prison. He remained unmoved upon learning of the sentence. Having earlier informed his attorney he fully expected to receive the death penalty. I mean,
I would
clearly.
assume so. Prior to his scheduled second trial in Orange County, Bonin was temporarily removed from death row and held in solitary confinement, where he remained until the conclusion of this trial. This was largely due to the fact that he had previously received a severe beating by an incarcerated gang member with whom he had shared a cell. While Bonin was in solitary confinement, Charvet attempted to secure a change of venue, saying the extensive pretrial publicity surrounding the case in Orange County, it would minimize the chances of securing an untainted jury within the jurisdiction. This motion was refused by Judge Kenneth Lay, who ruled in November that there had only been minimal publicity surrounding Bonin's case in Orange County following his earlier convictions.
Okay. Good for you.
Okay.
Bonin brought the trial, Orange County, 21st of March, 1983, charged with the robbery and murder of 4 victims, whose bodies had been found within the jurisdiction. He was tried before Superior Court Judge Kenneth Lay. 204 prospective jurors were subjected to voir dire jury selection until 16 were picked in June. Bonin's attorney then renewed an earlier filed motion that the trial should be moved outside of Orange County. This motion was again rejected by Judge, who ruled that the trial would begin on June 14th, whether you like it or not, motherfuckers.
Yep. The prosecutor, Brian Brown, contended that all 4 victims killed within the constituency had been abducted while hitchhiking, then ordered to strip before being bound, raped, beaten, tortured, then strangled. In each instance, the ligature had left an impression upon the victim's neck. He also noted similarities in each murder, and between these and 2 of those for which Bonin had earlier been convicted in L.A. County, Miranda and Wells. So they both have the same trademark there, huh?
Emphasis was placed upon the fibers found upon each of the Orange County victims and 3 L.A. County victims.
Were they allowed? Well, clearly. Sometimes they don't let you do shit from other trials.
And these fibers were a precise match to the carpeting in Bonin's van. As such, Brown stated, the 4 Orange County victims had been killed by the same individual who killed Miranda and Wells, and his accomplices in the Miranda and Wells murders. Miley and Monroe would testify as to their participation. The prosecution presented forensic experts who testified on matching fibers and blood found in that van. And I'm sure they're like, yep.
Well, Charvet refuted these contentions, saying that any similarities in modus operandi did not automatically prove his client's guilt, and that the evidence presented did not support the prosecution's contention beyond a reasonable doubt that Bonin had murdered any of the 4 Orange County victims, or even the 2 L.A. County victims. Charvet attacked the credibility of Monroe and contended Bonin was simply a scapegoat for 4 unsolved murders. That's possible.
Right.
Did he admit to those ones?
Maybe. He also argued that Brown had spent more time discussing the 2 L.A. cases Bonin had been convicted for, more than even actually proven Bonin had committed any of the Orange County murders. Well, during the 6-week trial, too long, Bonin's attorneys called 2 witnesses in his defense. One of them was Monroe, who conceded Bonin had communicated with him prior to his testifying in his second trial, requesting that he lie when testifying.
August 1st, both counsels delivered their closing arguments, and the jury retired. They deliberated for less than 3 hours before announcing on the 2nd that they had found Bonin guilty of each count of murder and robbery.
Fuck yeah, they did.
After 3 days deliberating Bonin's penalty,
that's way too long.
August 22nd, the jury announced their recommendations. He, too, will be sentenced to death on each of the 4 counts.
Wow.
August 26th, Bonin received 4 further death sentences. Following these convictions, Bonin was then transferred from Orange County Jail back to the San Quentin State Prison. He's got to sit that long-awaited execution on death row.
With the old gas chamber. In his years on death row, Bonin undertook painting and writing. He wrote a series of short stories called Doing Time, Stories from the Mind of a Death Row Prisoner. He became close friends with convicted murderers Lawrence Bittaker and Randy Kraft, who shared the nickname Freeway Killer with him. Wow. Douglas Clark, and also Jimmy Lee Smith. He also corresponded with numerous individuals, including the mothers of some of his victims.
Oh, jeez.
2 of the mothers, he never expressed regret or remorse over the murders, purposefully withholding info his victims' families sought, and seemingly deriving pleasure from their discontent. Yeah, what a piece of shit. Bonin once informed the mother of Sean King that her son had been his favorite victim, as he was such a screamer.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, man.
Why are they talking to him?
Right.
Bonin told both his defense attorneys and several people with whom he corresponded that Butts had been the actual ringleader behind the murders, and that he had simply been Butts' accomplice. These claims would be refuted by prosecutor Sterling Norris at Bonin's L.A. County murder trial, who said before Bonin's execution, he was the leader, and he chose weak people he could use.
Exactly. Bonin was finally scheduled to be executed by lethal injection. Oh, didn't get the gas chamber. In 1992,
They outlawed that shit.
Right, following the execution of Robert Alton Harris. That was the first inmate California had executed since 1967. Harris had exhibited evident symptoms of discomfort, including convulsions, for up to 4 minutes throughout his 15 minutes in the gas chamber. As such, the state of California opted to use lethal injection instead. They're like, yeah, that gas shit is just so much, especially for the families that are watching this shit. They're like, ooh, it's kind of cruel and unusual.
Bonin, he filed numerous appeals against his convictions and sentencing, citing issues such as jury prejudice, the potential of jury inflammation via listening to numerous victim impact statements, to which his defense counsel had offered to stipulate, and inadequate defense.
Oh, get out of here.
For these appeals, Bonin hired new lawyers who initially submitted contentions that Charvet had provided inadequate defense at his trials by failing to place sufficient emphasis upon Bonin's bipolar disorder and childhood sexual abuse.
Get the fuck out of here. It's not an excuse. These lawyers contended that had Charvet placed further emphasis on these issues, Bonin would have been humanized in the eyes of his juries. I don't think so. Each successive appeal proved unsuccessful. Despite upholding the convictions, the Supreme Court poured scorn upon Judge Keene for failing to fully heed a warning given by the prosecution prior to the L.A. County trial that Monroe had discussed the possibility of agreeing to legal representation by Charvet prior to his testimony.
Oh.
Despite admonishing Charvet for a potential conflict of interest, Judge Keene had permitted him to act as Bonin's defense attorney at his first trial.
That should have probably got a new trial.
Yeah, that's rough.
However, the Supreme Court ruled in 1989 that Charvet had effectively cross-examined Monroe at trial, and that Keene's actions, though inexplicable, had not effectively harmed Bonin's legal defense. Merit was given to Bonin's contention that his defense should have been allowed to stipulate to the testimony of the victim's parents, rather than their being allowed to identify photographs of their sons in both life and death at his trial.
Oh.
Despite this ruling, this finding was also deemed not to have affected the overall verdict.
No.
I don't think...
No.
With all the evidence and stuff, the victims' families didn't need to do anything.
Right. The final submission of the United States Court of Appeals submitted in 1994. Bonin contended issues such as being denied the effective assistance of counsel at his trials, that he had been denied due process at his L.A. trial due to the judge's refusal to suppress Monroe and Miley's testimonies. He also said that Charvet failed to point out Bonham's brain damage and other mitigating circumstances, and that the judge at his Orange County trial had denied his counsel's motion for a change of venue upon the basis that the pretrial publicity had effectively minimized any chance of obtaining any unbiased jury.
This appeal was rejected as well in 1995, with the appellate judges stating they found no evidence of legal misconduct, and no evidence existed that the 13 jurors who served upon the Orange County trial had been incapable of judging Bonin with impartiality.
Right.
As such, the judges declared their satisfaction with Bonin's convictions, concluding that his verdict would not have changed with these further mitigating circumstances revealed. You're dying, okay?
Right.
Just accept it.
He held on for 13 years.
Right.
Holy shit. The various experts who had examined Bonin would find conflict with one another's assertions, with Dr. Park Dietz opining that fellow Dr. Foster largely mischaracterized and exaggerated evidence used to prove Bonin was extensively abused as a child, and that he also mistakenly assumed that Bonin's Babinski reflex and other symptoms were indicative of brain damage that influenced his crimes. Get the fuck out of here. On February 20th, 1996, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals rejected Bonin's plea for clemency on the grounds of inadequate legal representation at both trials. You're dying, Ger.
Well, I think I've accepted the fact that this may come about, and I've made my peace with it, and if it happens, it happens. As far as how I'm going to feel at that very moment, I can't answer that question. I don't know. I don't think any of us would know until we're there. Well, probably I went into the service too soon because I was peaking in my bowling career. So I regret that I didn't get to go out and get the instruction and pursue that, because I've always had a love for bowling.
Oh, you idiot.
This is Bonin reflecting on his impending execution and life regrets, February 22nd, 1996. Jeez, his only regrets is he didn't freaking
Get the bowl.
focus on bowling more. This fucking guy, man.
Wow. Bonin was indeed executed by lethal injection instead of gas chamber at San Quentin Prison on February 23rd, 1996, 14 years after his first death sentence had been imposed. He was the first person to be executed by lethal injection in the history of California.
Oh, look at you.
In his final interview, given to a local radio station less than 24 hours before his death, Bonin said that he had made peace with the fact that he was about to die.
Yeah, we know about the bowling.
Right. Adding that his only major regret in life was that he did not pursue any of his teenage passion of bowling. He expressed his disagreement with the state's decision to execute him, saying that he thought death penalty is wrong. Oh, okay. He denied responsibility for his actions, saying that he had no control over his actions. He also said he would not be able to live a normal life outside of prison. Well, you're never going out of prison, buddy.
You don't have to worry about that, bud. 6 p.m. on the 23rd, Bonin was moved from his cell to a death watch cell, where he ordered his last meal, which was 2 large pizzas, 3 pints of ice cream, and 3 6-packs of Coke. Damn, dude, was just might as well, right? His last hours were spent with 5 people he had chosen, including his attorney, his chaplain, and prospective biographer. His attorney said that he had not detected any remorse in Bonin. Around 1 hour prior to his scheduled execution, the Supreme Court refused to hear Bonin's final plea to overturn his death sentence, deciding that Bonin's attorneys had not failed to give him adequate legal representation by not early. Yeah, we know. It's over with, bud. Yeah. Up until the last minute, it's done.
The Court of Appeals ruled that his attorney should not have waited until the last minute to submit arguments to overturn or postpone the death sentence. They also rejected Bonin's claim that he had a right to choose between the gas chamber or lethal injection as his method of execution.
Sure.
No, your victims didn't have a right to how to die, motherfucker.
There was a dude just recently, like Colorado or someplace out there. He selected the firing squad. It was like the first time in like 40 years or some shit. Somebody's done that.
Nice.
11:45 p.m., Bonin was escorted from his holding cell into the execution chamber. In his final statement, given to the prison warden an hour before his scheduled execution at midnight, why'd they do so late?
All right.
Bonin again expressed no remorse for his crimes. He left a note that stated, "I feel the death penalty is not an answer to the problems at hand. I feel it sends the wrong message to the people of this country. Young people act as they see other people acting instead of as people tell them to act. I would advise that when a person has a thought of doing anything serious against the law, that before they did, they should go to a quiet place and think about it seriously."
Yeah, you should have done that, bud. Bonin was pronounced dead 12:13 a.m., 49 years old. None of Bonin's relatives chose to witness his execution, although the event was witnessed by several relatives of his victims. According to several witnesses, Bonin's execution passed without complications and was heavily sedated throughout the latter stages of the procedure. On this subject, Governor Pete Wilson, who had rejected a submitted plea for clemency, called Bonin the poster boy for the capital punishment.
See, this is how you should die when we inject these into your veins.
Look at this boy.
Jeez. Bonin's family refused to claim his remains following his execution. They were then cremated in a private ceremony with none of his family members present. Then his ashes later scattered over the Pacific Ocean. 3 weeks, should have put it in the local sewer. 3 weeks after the execution, authorities discovered that his mother had openly exploited an administrative error pertaining to her son's Social Security disability payments, which Bonin had begun receiving for a mental disability in 1972, and which should have terminated upon his imprisonment in 1982.
Huh.
Jeez.
Wow. She's getting that money.
Not even really that much, though.
This administrative error, totaling approximately $79,000, was only discovered after a funeral director notified the Social Security Administration of Bonin's death. His mother agreed to pay restitution for receiving these payments in March, claiming neither she nor her son were aware of the illegality of their actions. Obviously, you knew, you idiots. Throughout Bonin's trial, in the early years of subsequent incarceration on death row, experts devoted much speculation and debate as to whether the root cause of his crimes lay in his abusive and dysfunctional upbringing. Mm-hmm.
One of his lawyers was quoted stating it was virtually impossible for Bonin to be a successful human being, given the abuse he had endured, while a prospective biographer said he was essentially unable to handle minute problems in his day-to-day life due to trauma.
Well, you know what? You guys had that chance to keep him locked up multiple times.
Right. Opponents and advocates of the death penalty alike acknowledged Bonin had endured extensive abuse throughout childhood, but much scorn was given to the claims from his attorneys and supporters that his murders had been a direct manifestation of this abuse.
David McVicker, who witnessed Bonin's execution, was traumatized by his ordeal for several years. He was haunted by nightmares on a nightly basis concerning the incident. He dropped out of high school and became dependent on drugs and alcohol. He described the execution as being symbolic of closure. In the following years, he actively campaigned to ensure that his accomplices, Miley and Monroe, remain incarcerated.
Good. Speaking of Monroe, he was sentenced to a term of 15 to life for second-degree murder of Wells in 1981. He has repeatedly appealed the sentence, claiming that he had not known Bonin was the Freeway Killer until after Wells' murder, and that he had been tricked into accepting a plea bargain whereby he pleaded guilty to the second-degree murder charge. He's also written to successive governors, requesting he be executed rather than undergo life imprisonment for what he claims is a crime I didn't commit.
Oh.
So if you didn't commit, why do you want to get killed?
Wow. He has repeatedly been denied parole and is still incarcerated at Mule Creek State Prison. He is next available for parole in 2029.
Damn.
Miley, he was sentenced to a term of 25 years to life for the first-degree murder of Miranda in 1982. He was informed he would need to serve a minimum of 16 years and 8 months before considered parole. While incarcerated, Miley was frequently reprimanded for violating prison rules. He was later sentenced to a concurrent term of 25 years of life for the abduction and murder of McCabe.
Oh, you're done. May 25th, 2016, Miley died of injuries he sustained 2 days previously when he was attacked by another inmate in an exercise yard at the Mule Creek State Prison.
Wow.
At the time, his next scheduled parole hearing was to be held in 2019. Pugh, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison for the voluntary manslaughter of Harry Turner in 1982. He had initially been charged with the first-degree murder of Turner, in addition to companion charges of robbery and sodomy. However, after 5 days of deliberation, the jury found Pugh guilty of the reduced charge of manslaughter, innocent of robbery and sodomy. He served less than 4 years of his sentence, and he's been released from prison, as far as we know, since 1985.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, that could have been the worst one that we covered so far. Even Dahmer.
Even 14 years of that's just stupidity that he was on death row for 14 years. I mean, I get the judicial system where you got a right to appeals and all that, but the motherfucker admitted to half of it.
More than half of it.
Holy
90% of it. Yeah, that's William Bonin, the old Freeway Killer, not to be confused with the Freeway Killer.
Right.
Who is operated in... Damn, there were 2 Freeway Killers at the same time?
Yeah. Randy Kraft.
He was a Freeway Killer from 71-83, so it was the same time.
Wow.
He killed in California, Oregon, and Michigan.
Oh.
Yeah, we'll have him sometime down the road, clearly. But, yeah, so 2 Freeway... Like I said, 80s. The other guy was 80s. Dahmer, late 80s, 90s. Bundy, 80s.
70s.
Gacy, 70s, 80s, whatever the hell it was. Lawrence Bittaker, the frickin', or the 2 Box Killers.
He was in
79. I mean.
Wow.
And these dudes went on. Are they serial killers or like spree killers? So right. June to October is the only time they did anything here. 5 teenage girls in Southern California over a 5-month period.
Jeez. Piece of shit. Pliers, ice picks, and sledgehammers. Ugh.
Yep. The old 2 Box Killers. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Well, that's Bonin. Well, it's enough death for us tonight, so we'll see you next week for more death, though, as we profile some more prohibition. No, wait, what are we on? Serial killer? No, definitely more, because we're be profiling the last of the bosses of the Lucchese family as we speak right now. So I'm sure there'll be some death in some of those stories that we got, like 3 more bosses that we'll cover, and then, yeah, off to the races with everything else we do here. So, yeah, we'll see you next week for Mafia. This is the Mouth of Michigan as we use.